Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I'd like to welcome you to The Raven's Call. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy, sets my mind on fire at the time. Big UPG warning at the beginning of the episode, like always. This is just the views of one Gothi, one heathen here in East Texas. Doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of my tribe, let alone greater heathenry as a whole. I actually don't believe in a meta heathen review. I'm very tribal based, very grassroots based. So take that as you will. These videos are meant to be conversation starters, maybe a jump starter for research, looking into things, those kind of deals. So some housekeeping stuff. With the work schedule, it's proving to be particularly difficult to get preparation done for videos. So I may be spotty for a little bit on the videos. I know I've talked about this on the channel before, but I'm getting to the point where there's a lot of times where I'm getting down to the wire and I'm like, I really need to film something. I don't want to just turn out crap. I want it to be quality, and I don't really have time to prep. I'll go to my list, but if I've burned through most of the stuff on my list and I haven't had time to brainstorm more and put on the list, things may get a little spotty here and there. So we'll see. I may have to go in and revise my filming schedule and figure out a better fit for the channel. We're rocking along with subscribers, so thank you guys for all of the support. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm hoping to eventually start back up my East Texas Heathen stuff for those of you that are following, especially those of you that are in the East Texas area. I know I've gotten some emails and some messages from people in the East Texas area interested in this kind of connection, grassroots thing, looking for quality people, and I completely get that. I am trying. Currently, the way my work schedule shakes out, my weekends are coveted and frequently spoken for. So being able to schedule a specific time for a meet and greet has proved increasingly difficult. So I'm having trouble enough managing time with home and my Innengard, my own tribe, and so I got to prioritize, and unfortunately that means that I haven't been able to turn the attention to doing meetups like I used to. I'm going to try and get back into that, but I'm not going to make any promises as to a time frame as of yet. I've got to wait and see how things kind of settle out with the job front as far as my schedule and just having time to do everything that I need to do. So without any further ado, I did get some really cool fan mail. I am not ready to show it on the channel yet because it was a really cool dice bag that the viewer sent in, and it's hand-sewn, hand-tanned. It's a beautiful dice bag. I mean, it's incredible. So I wanted to let you know, yes, I got your package. I do intend to show it on the channel. She had a rather lengthy letter that I have not had a chance to read over in its entirety yet, and I wanted to review that before I went on here. The viewer wanted to remain anonymous as far as the donation to the channel, all that stuff. If you haven't followed the cutting room floor stuff, I'm a big D&D nerd, big D&D nerd. I DM a group here mostly for my tribe and my local folk community, and we have a great time. We actually have a session this weekend, and I'm totally stoked about it. I love DMing. I'm much more at home behind the screen than I am in front of it. I'm just a world builder. It's one of the things I do, and I very much enjoy it. So she sent in this dice bag as she just felt like she needed to, and I am eternally grateful. It's a wicked sweet dice bag. I will show it and share the amount of her story that she indicates that I can. Probably in the next video, we'll see. Just depends on where I am in preparation and whether or not I have it with me at the time that I film. So we'll see how that goes. But I did want you to know, the viewer that sent this in, I did receive it, and thank you very much. I very much appreciate it, and it is beautiful. So my lady was like, I may steal that from you. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So anyway, thank you very much. And for anybody that wants to send things into the channel, letters, artwork, whatever, P.O. boxes down below. I will show those things on the channel. I would show that one today, but because of the long letter, I wanted to wait and make sure that I had all of the details right, and I didn't have time. I literally picked it up this morning. I did not have time to prep that before the channel, before the show. So just wanted to let you know it came in. So thank you. All right, on to today's subject. I did get, and this is one of those things that, as you guys know, I'm horrible about responding to emails and messages. I'm horrible at it. I look at them and I go, oh, that's going to be a good one. I need to come back to that. And then I can't get back to it. I'll look at the stack of emails in my inbox and I'm like, those deserve time and those deserve attention, but those are going to be in-depth questions frequently, and I don't necessarily have the time to dedicate the mental acuity to it at that time and be like, all right, well, I'm going to come back to that. And I'll start it and I'll come back to it later. But then it may be 2 weeks before I sit down and look through those emails again and have a chance to really pour through it. So I'm trying to get better at that. I sent out a batch of reply emails to some today, but I may be 2 or 3 weeks behind. And as a result, sometimes I'll get a request for a video and I will not remember to make a note who sent in the request. So, but this is one that a couple of people have asked me about, so it's not necessarily one that I have to attribute to one individual person, but I do like to give credit where credit is due when I can. Anyway, so today's question, or today's to write-in request from multiple sources is, and the one in particular that I can remember, I can't remember if it was an email or a message, an individual had a relative that was looking to start up a hof in their area, and they were pretty set on trying to make an open hof. And I know I've talked about this on the channel before, but I wanted to come back and kind of revisit it because I know there's some people that haven't had a chance to go back and watch those particular videos, or just haven't stumbled across it, or there may be information that I haven't shared out, or points of view about it that I haven't shared out. And I can't remember if it was an entire video or if I just did kind of a snippet in there. But the idea is, so you want to build a hof. Okay, well, let's talk about a hof, and let's talk about what that looks like, because I definitely want to see people build these kind of things that may not necessarily have come across in my previous talkings about it. I love to see people build hofs, to build halls, to put a permanent thing out there that is heathen, and this is a center of heathen power. But you guys know where I stand as far as Innengard, Nutengard, and in the recommendations and advice that I can give with regards to those kind of things. So, because I have dreams of making a hof on my own property, time and finances are the big hold up on those, as you all know and have experienced. So let's talk some about building a hof. We're going to talk some about the basic mechanics of it, what a hof is, what it can be for you, and then we'll talk a little bit about open-closed kind of thing towards the end. Okay, so first off, what is a hof? Well, a hof is a holy hall. Basically, it's a church, for lack of a better term, for heathen purposes. It's a hall. It is a location that is set aside for the purposes of doing heathenry, doing heathen stuff. Now, keep in mind, I'm utilizing a modern version of the word. If you go back and search the etymology of everything, there's going to be some slight differences, and I don't want you to look at it and be like, well, the dictionary definition of this is this and this and this. Yes, I'm using the modern vernacular, okay? One of the things that we run into with heathenry is there are old terms and there are new ideas, because the world we live in today is not the world we used to live in. So a lot of words from classical and ancient vernacular will have moved forward and progressed in time, as language does, to become a new kind of thing in the modern age. A word may take on a different meaning, or it may be applied differently than it was in ancient times. It is important to go back and look at the etymology of these terms. It's important to go back and pay attention to where they came from, because that can inform the use in the modern era. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to adhere to the ancient definition of the term. We live in the here and now, and we use words to describe to each other what we mean on something. So it's natural that words are going to develop and change over time. Anybody that studies language will see that there is development and change and mutation in language as it develops generation to generation. We're constantly adding words to the lexicon that some of them I'm ashamed have been added to the lexicon, because seriously, folks, Some of these words should not be words. And I don't mean in heathenry in general. I just mean in the zeitgeist of humanity. The word bay was added to the dictionary. Seriously, people? Irritates me. Like the modern use of the word verse versus verses. Clue, folks. Verses is not plural. Verses is V-E-R-S-U-S, not verses as in V-E-R-S-E-S, which is the stanzas of a song. It's a verse of a song, you know. To say, you know, Ryu versus Ken in Street Fighter, under gods, the people that use that term probably have never played Street Fighter in their lives. I'm getting old. Wow. Okay. Anyway, so verses is the word, not verse. VS was not meant to be verse. So it's not Ryu versus Ken. It's Ryu versus Ken. It's not a plural. So you can see language develops and language changes. I can get pretty irate about particular uses of certain terms. I'm a word nerd. It's kind of a thing. So, hey, that's a new hashtag. Hashtag word nerd. But anyway, the gist here is that I'm using the modern vernacular of hof, which essentially means a hall dedicated to heathen purposes. It is not a church specifically. The closest correlate is a church, but it's more than that. And it's not a basic mead hall. I don't necessarily like to call a hof a mead hall because a mead hall is meant for communal gathering. Hof is meant for communal gathering, including and adding on the ritualized elements of heathen religious practice. A hof is an enclosed space, usually with walls and a roof, and it includes typically a set-aside dais where an altar is set up and a dedicated ritual space is established. Then there is usually seating in the area wherein people can gather for communal elements. There can be feasting and things like that, still with a ritual space up front. And this is based upon archaeological digs and what we've been able to turn up from some of the outlines and some of the leftover ruins of these older structures, as far as what has survived. And I'm thinking mostly of the Northern European, like Scandinavian elements, because that's where my aesthetic is centered and that's where I pull a lot of my stuff from. People that focus more on mainland Europe, Germany, Anglo-Saxon influences, things like that, will probably have some different input. There's also the element of Slav churches, which took their influence from hofs. Here's the deal. The term hof, H-O-F, in Old Norse actually would be pronounced holf. And so it's not, that F kind of had a V sound to it, so it'd actually be holf. That's a thing. There's some importance there. I intend to go back and look some more into it, but that's what I'm going to spout off the top of my head, and then I'm not going to fill you with any false facts after that because I'm just spouting off the top of my head. We're not going to do that. But anyway, a hof in and of itself, the Slav churches were kind of based on the element of hof, but added to a unique aesthetic element to themselves. They're beautiful buildings, but there's a lot that we can learn from them about structure and about how these things are utilized for a ritual purpose. And a hof itself is intended to be utilized for ritual purposes, gathering the folks in an enclosed space and performing ritual. Hofs are usually dedicated to that purpose. It doesn't mean that they can't be used for communal gathering, though. That's one of the things that differs as far as like a chapel versus because I have to specify, keeping in mind my understanding of Judeo-Christian church practices is extremely limited because I don't have firsthand experience. Okay, I don't really know. I know there's the chapel, and then I know there's the rest of the church. It seems to me like the rest of the church is used for communal purposes, I think, education purposes, from what I've been able to gather. And then the chapel itself is used more for the actual religious practice, I believe, from what I've been able to discern. Anyway, please don't flood me with emails about how a church works. I don't care. It's fine. It's fine. I'm perfectly fine with how my level of interaction there is. I'm cool. My focus is on the hof. So the hof itself is usually a rectangular building, long, with a dais set at one end with the altar set up, and then there is room for communal gathering throughout the hof. They were usually turf-style, sod-style houses where they were, stone walls built up to the side with a sod roof, A lot of the turf houses that you can see in Scandinavia were used for both housing and for hofs. These were set aside for the purpose of bringing the community together, worshiping the gods and things like that. Now, there are examples of altars and large-scale religious gathering places. Specifically, I'm thinking about the temple at Uppsala. There are some other examples of temples where temples were created for the worship of the deities. From what I gather, those were more tied to like the upper echelon ruling class kind of thing. There was a lot of, it's not the kind of thing where everybody would go to festival at Uppsala for the whole big festival that they would do. From what I gather, I think it was more upper echelon individuals, representatives of families and tribes and areas and regions that would go on behalf of their people and represent, kind of like we would at, well, okay, there's not really much that's extant that still follows that kind of thing, but it's kind of like Thing in that respect, in that it wasn't necessarily everybody, from what I can tell. Could be mistaken on that one, so I'm going to leave that caveat there. But in essence, those seemed to me like they were different from what normally would be seen as a hof or a tribal hall. A tribal hall is dedicated usually for the purposes of that tribe and then any guests that they may include and bring in. One of the examples of a mead hall type setup would be Herod from Beowulf. It is entirely possible, though not documented and evidenced in the writing because it was heavily Christianized, that the hof that Herod could have been a hof in style. It is also possible that it was just a communal gathering place, but the special attention that was paid to it and the dedicated purposes for it and the reason that it was the epicenter of the story leads me to believe that there was some increased importance in that. And I would guess, educated guess, but I would surmise that the hall at Herod was actually something along the lines of a hof, where it was both drinking and partying and gathering, but also dedicated ritual service depending on its use at the time. It's a multifunctional building. When you're dealing with smaller spaces and limited resources, you create multifunction spaces. So, the idea behind the layout of the hof, though, this rectangular building with the dais and the altar at one end, is the idea that this is a dedicated space. You establish the holy space up here, the sacred space layout, and then the rest of the building serves as the communal gathering. You extend that out to the gathering when you initiate ritual, bring all of that in, and you do your ritual there. It also allows for doing sumbel within a building like that. I know some of the practices of some of the Anglo-Saxons are that they can't do sumbel outside. They can't do sumbel without being under a roof. It has to be an inside thing. The idea being that it is the most inner of rituals and therefore should not be left open to the outside. It should be enclosed in the inner, and only the inner should be accessible to that. So, I don't know for certain that this is the case with sumbel and the hof, but I do feel like strongly that this is probably tied together. It merits further research. There's a lot of these things that just merit further research. The extent of the research, because I'm not a hardcore recon, the extent of the research that I go into specific areas is a little less important sometimes to me than the practicality of how I choose to work with my tribe and how we build our cultural aesthetic. So keep that in mind as I go along. So that's kind of the gist of hof. You establish the altar space, you create a dedicated barrier for sacred space and then profane space, and then the rest of the area is used for communal elements and then can be extended into the ritual purposes by extending out that sacred space tied into the rest of the building, but still it is an enclosed space. The entire thing serves as a permanent barrier. It's really common to, when you establish one like that, when you establish the building and dedicate it to the purpose, that you go through and do a bloat, and you use the bloat tin in the bowl to bless the building so that it is dedicated to that purpose. And then, be aware of where your boundaries are, and if you're going to set aside some of the practical elements when it comes to a hof, some of the things that I would recommend is if you're going to set aside a dedicated ritual space within the hof, I recommend you keep it a dedicated ritual space and that you don't let that become overflow area for the social. It should be revered and respected and treated with respect. That should be set aside for that purpose, and generally not used if that's not the purpose. If you're just gathering to have the tribe together, and you want to gather in the hof to spend time together and camaraderie and everything, gather down in the pit, as it were, and then access that space, that sacred space on the dais when the time comes. Now I say dais because it seemed like, from what I could tell, there was a slightly raised area where the altar was set up. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but it does seem like that is part of the design that I have seen, at least in several of the things. I'm sure people will come in with some contrasting evidence. That's fine. It's always interesting. So, the application of a hof in modern times, some of the, like I said, the practical elements of things can be used for feasting, it can be used for sumbel, it can be used for ritual, it can be used for general tribal gatherings. A hof in and of itself is a representation of the inner. It's a manifestation of the inner in physical form, which is why I want to see so many more of these kind of things be built when it's available, when people can do it. In the modern era, it doesn't necessarily have to be like it was. We don't have to do things according to the same layout and blueprint that our ancestors or different regional people did back in quote-unquote arch-heathen times. They can be modernized. A standalone portable building that is, you can take it out there, drop it on the property, and then, tie it down, get ready to go. And once it becomes a permanent structure, you can turn that into your hof. That can be your dedicated space. And you can set aside a ritual space at one end of the building, and the rest of it can be utilized for that communal. You can expand that ritual. When it comes ritual time, you can expand to the rest of the building. They can be multi-roomed. A lot of what I've seen with older hofs is that I've seen some multi-room, I've seen some uniroom. It just kind of depends on region and design. So, at least I think I have. I hope I'm not misremembering the evidence there. But the gist here is that the design is kind of up to you and the functionality of what you want to do. I have also known people to set aside a kind of quasi-hof as a dedicated room in their own home, in their own building, that is specifically set aside for that purpose. Back in the early days of Ridgar, our chieftain had one set aside that way, and we would do ritual in that room, and we would gather there for our festival stuff or ritual things, and frequently we would sit in there and visit whenever we had the tribe together, and that's just kind of a thing. It was a center of power, and it was kind of the tribal hearth. And that's what I want to kind of drive home, is that the hof itself becomes kind of a tribal hearth. It's a shared hearth. Everybody's got their own individual hearths, but this becomes the hearth of the tribe. This becomes that place where the fire is lit for the tribe as a whole. And so it's a very important thing. It's a very holy thing to the tribe. And that's why I'm kind of dodgy about letting the outer into that. What is such a manifestation of the inner, letting the outer into that is dangerous. You're bringing in elements that are uncontrolled and that you cannot necessarily protect your Inengarth from. You can't necessarily protect your luck from it. But guestliness and hostliness are good things. So, it is good to bring your guests into your hof and to share that bounty and to enjoy that communal space with them and let them be a part of that. I'm not so wild about the idea of bringing strangers in, but that's unique to each individual. My view of it is that if I'm going to bring the outer into my inner, it's going to be hand-picked and hand-selected. It's going to be my guests, people that I kind of trust in that area. You can never fully trust, you never fully know. You cannot predict. No one knows what's in another man's mind. But you can do your best to kind of judge and gauge and be like, all right, I'm going to try and keep this to the people that I trust and can handle in this space, and that I feel are not going to damage our luck, that are not going to bring bad things into my hof. So, now, a lot of what I see when people talk about making hofs is they're thinking about churches, they're thinking about temples, they're thinking about open buildings where heathens in general can just come in and do their thing. I am leery of doing that kind of thing. One, because I am not beholden to the rest of heathenry. Just because a person is heathen doesn't necessarily mean I owe them anything. And I'm responsible for the upkeep of that building. I am responsible for what happens on there. Plus, there's liability issues if somebody should get hurt or injured while they're there. Opening up to the public is a huge thing. It's a huge thing. Plus, you're letting everything wash into that building. It's no longer a manifestation of the inner, but is rather a symbol for the outer. And while they have their place, I find that the individuals are usually better off focusing on their tribal element, their grassroots end of things, as opposed to that macro. Gee, big surprise if you followed anything on my channel. Eric favors the micro over the macro when it comes to tribalism. Crazy, huh? So I highly recommend being picky about the people that you let in. Yes, I absolutely think people should be building hofs. I absolutely think that people should be establishing permanent structures. And I think that they are going to be beacons for future generations. But I think they should be more focused on tribal, because that's where the benefit is to you. That's what's going to improve your luck. That's what's going to improve the refrain of your tribe, because this is your tribe's hof. And then you can extend honors to other tribes and to other people by inviting them to your hof and sharing that with them. That becomes more of an honor, more of a thing. If it's just a building that anybody can come into, that becomes more of a risk. You do not know if you're going to be letting in white supremacists. You don't know if you're going to be letting in Nazis. You don't know if you're going to be letting in people that are just looking to stir up trouble, people that want to vandalize and things like this. So it depends. And nothing in heathenry is designed around just open doors, everybody come on in kind of deal. All of the advice in the Havamal is like, hey, watch things, moderate things, keep an eye on things, protect what's important to you. Yes, be open. Yes, be sociable. Yes, be good and have a good face and represent your people well, but be guarded and be moderated in all things. So I think that the hof is kind of a similar deal in my view. For something that's so personalized to a tribe, it needs to be protected as a personal thing, as a manifestation of the hearth of the tribe. I feel like it should be guarded, and it shouldn't be like shut off. It should be shared, but it should be shared selectively, and the sharing of that is an honor, in my view. Keep in mind, these are just my views. People may differ with me, and that's fine. You do you. Not my hall, not my call. But yeah, that's if I were building a hof, I would build it on my property. I would dedicate it to its purpose. I would hold my tribal rituals in there. I would hold my tribal feasts in there. And then I would invite near and dear friends and people to whom I wish to express honor and tribal friendship with, and build those relationships with. I would extend that honor to them and invite them into that hall and share that with them, showing them that I'm extending them the honor of letting them come inside. And that's not something I would do for everyone. So those that have been inside my hof would know that it meant something, and that it's not just a willy-nilly I'm letting anyone in kind of thing. This also protects the building. This also protects my Inengarth and the luck that I have tied in that well there, because the dedicated altar ritual space becomes an epicenter for that energy, that well of luck. Now, this varies, of course, from a Vey, which is entirely outside. It is a sacred grove kind of situation, which I've talked about Veys on here before. Largely, a lot of my focus on here has been around Veys, because that's what I have established, and that's more of the praxis that I utilize. But I do want a hof. I desperately want a hof. I think it would be fantastic to have one, to build one, and develop it. I just don't have the fundage or the time right now to do that justice. And especially when there are other things where my obligations to my Inengarth mean that I need to spend that money elsewhere. I need to spend it on like farm equipment and stuff like that for the property, as opposed to blowing it on a hof, which, while yes, has implications for the tribe as a whole, the other things have imminent implications for my hearth and my number one responsibility. So kind of keep that in mind as you go through these things. Think of how is this most benefiting you and your tribe. You're not beholden to the rest of heathenry. Like, if I'm rolling through, just because I'm heathen, you don't owe me anything. You don't. You don't owe me to allow me into the house and to visit with your family and do all these things. No, that would be way overstepping boundaries. Just because I'm somebody who's on YouTube that you guys can see and know is a heathen doesn't behold me to you at all. It's kind of like the whole false kinship thing that I rant and rave about. It's the same kind of deal about misconceptions with hospitality. You can be hospitable without inviting everyone in. There's mutual obligations and understandings that go along with this tit-for-tat hospitality element, and you can be hospitable to someone, but you don't necessarily have to bring them in your home. You can, if you feel like it is safe to do so and is appropriate. Not everybody's the boogeyman, but it is okay to exercise that judgment. It's your responsibility to exercise that judgment when it comes to the safety and well-being of your family. If you don't feel like it's appropriate to let someone come into your home, then maybe it's time to figure out how to approach that from a different angle and politely redirect them and their focus. It's getting dark in here, guys. Forgive. I have a storm blowing in, and things are about to get kind of zany out here, I believe. Yeah. Happened in my last video, too, when the rain started coming down. Anyway, so you want to build a hof. Okay, cool. Build a hof. But think about the whys. The whys are always important. What is it you want to get out of this? What is your primary goal? Are you trying to build something for everyone, or are you trying to build something for your tribe? If you're trying to build something for everyone, I'm not the guy to come to for advice, because I'm kind of not on board with that idea. I have no problem with it. Like, if we were all well established and everybody had their stuff hammered out for the hearth and home, and everybody had their vase and their hofs and all that stuff, and heathenry was normalized, sure, I'd be on board with a communal temple kind of thing. But it's a temple, it's not a hof. A hof is a hearth for a tribe to me. Temple, like the temple at Uppsala, sure. Who would upkeep that? Why would they upkeep that? What would be the purpose behind it? Now, if it's upkept by the crown, and therefore is a representation of the crown's extension of hospitality and ties to the gods, that makes sense to me, because that is the level that it needs to be at. They are responsible for everything underneath them. Therefore, the crown opening a temple that would focus on these things, that jives. I get that. I do, especially when the worldview, religious views, and the leadership roles are integrated so completely. It's not like with some of the Judeo-Christian world and this general secular world as a whole, where there's a strong separation of church and state. The worldview is the worldview, and it impacts how we do things and how we govern, how we do all of those things. So there wouldn't be as strong separation of church and state from a heathen worldview. You know, it wouldn't be like, okay, here is the ruling body, and here is the religious body, and the two may work together. That's church and state kind of thing. Church and state. And it doesn't necessarily jive well with the heathen worldview, wherein the leader would be blessed by the gods as the seed of luck for the tribe. Things are more integrated than that in a more traditional kind of arch-heathen worldview, from what I've been able to tell. So I don't necessarily see a problem with like an overarching, like if you were to have like a regional heathen like thing, you know, where there were a number of tribes that banded together, and then there was like one seen leader of the representatives underneath that thing, that thingdom, then I could see having a dedicated temple for everyone beneath that thingdom. I could see that. But in general, an open one for just the general public, that doesn't jive as well. Simply because it is a wide open window, and therefore that building is not inner. That building is outer, and it stays outer. It is not. It's not. That building is not about your relationship with the gods and goddesses. That building is about your relationship with the people at that point, and helping to facilitate their connection to the gods and goddesses. Although it's debatable how well that would work when it's disparate individuals with no continuity. It's a thing. It's not a church. It's a different kind of deal. So, as far as setting up like a dedicated, like for a temple space, setting up a dedicated iconography, an idol, where people could come and pay homage to the idol. Yeah, okay, that tracks. That totally tracks. That's fine. But as far as like leading ritual and things like that, they're, again, more for a tribe or a community as opposed to just the general public. Hell, there were even times in the Heimskringla where the king would go wandering during the holidays, and I believe it was Alpha Blot that time of year when the king came to visit, and the king was turned away because Alpha Blot was for the Innengarth, and he was not of that, so he needed to turn away until Alpha Blot was over, and then he could come visit. So even the king is excluded from inner ritual. That's something to keep in mind as we build these things and we kind of keep these deals in mind. I advise heavily focus on your inner. Think about the whys. Why are you building this? How is this mostly going to impact and affect your group? I find that most people that are wanting to set up a public hof are wanting to set up a temple, and it's more about establishing their gefrein in the community than it is necessarily the growth of other heathens. It varies, but for the most part, the growth of other heathens is not your concern. It's not your area. The growth of other heathens in your community, yeah, totally. But if you're on the East Coast, the growth of a heathen on the West Coast is not your responsibility. It's not your purview. That's up to them. So just kind of keep these things in mind. It's keeping appropriate boundaries, protecting what is important. And I use the word protecting a lot, but that's just because I'm big about the boundaries between inner and outer, and being judgy about who comes and goes. And inner and outer, the Innengarth, Utengarth, that's modern vernacular versus arch-heathen vernacular. It's not an arch-heathen thing, but it's something that you can kind of see in practice. They just didn't have a word for it. They didn't have terminology dedicated to it. So it's a different kind of thing, The bell means that I've got customers coming in. So I'm going to wrap up. If this is something you guys are interested in, we can come back and revisit. We're already kind of hitting the half hour, 40-minute mark. So I'm going to let this one go. Plus, I'm about to lose all of my light with the weather blowing in. So thank you all for watching. I hope this answered some questions, gave some insights into my particular views with regards to hofs and their importance and their role, but also in the scope of inner versus outer and how that pertains to these ritual spaces. We can come back in more depth later if people want. Just let me know. Okay, guys? So hail to you all. Thank you. I really appreciate the support. I genuinely do. Thank you all. May your hearth fires burn bright. Okay. I think I've got this set up. Forgive my hair. It's ridiculous, but it's crazy these days. All right. So yes, yeah, hi. Ridiculous. Yeah, life has been crazy. Still, as always, I like it. Yeah, you know how it is. Got D&D this weekend. Excited, rock on. Absolutely fantastic. I'm excited for it because I'm antsy to get back into my story, tell my story, and I've been working nonstop for a while now, so I'm ready for a little play. I think it'll be fun, and I'm excited for the party to progress through my dungeon and hopefully get to some of my narrative stuff. That's going to be fun. So by the next week, I should have some better stuff going on. I hope. Anyway, we shall see. Been working on some homebrew monsters and things like that really excite me. So I very much enjoy that. Other than that, work has been just insane. I'm getting better at it, getting faster at it, so I'm getting home a little earlier, getting a little bit more sleep. As I continue to get better, it'll improve. So life is good there. Yeah. So I don't have much for the after credits today. life has been completely enveloped with work and with that. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of playtime, you know. Did manage to get a new riding mower and knock out a bunch of yard work that we needed to do. You got acreage, you need some equipment in order to be able to handle it. So my yard went from looking pretty derelict and junky to actually looking nice. So I'm excited about that. Of course, this is in the middle of the East Texas rain season, which we may well get kind of a storm blow through here while I'm filming. I don't know yet. We're in that time of year where it's hot during the day and then the storms blow in the afternoon and the evening, and that's always when you have the highest chance for tornadoes. Yeah, I'm well acquainted with those. If you haven't caught up on it, go back and check the Storm Riders story on the channel, and you will hear about my run-in with the tornado and how we dealt with that in the aftermath. It's been several years now, and we're still bouncing back from financial impact of all that. It was crazy. So anyway, I guess without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into the episode. Sorry guys, I hope that I will have some more fun stuff for the cutting room floor. It's going to have to shift from me doing nothing but work to having some time to do some fun stuff. I mean, video game wise, I'm playing through Darksiders again, but I only get to pick that up every couple of days for about an hour here and there. Mostly just because I like the series and I want to go through it. Next up, I think I'm going to play Hades. I'm a big Switch player. I haven't got to sit down in front of my PS4 in ages. So there's games I want to play on there. Oh, I forgot I have Doom Eternal too. I love the Doom games. I don't know. Ooh, it may be Hades, it may be Doom. I haven't decided yet. My backlog is pretty stacked, but I hardly ever have time to play anymore. And a lot of times I'm going back and playing Diablo 3 again because I love that game and I continue to play it. It's a lot of fun. So anyway, I digress. On with the show, shall we? We're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.